At 1:47 a.m., a ranger's voice broke through the radio static in Sector 12 and said 5 words that were never meant for the official summary: "It's not an animal." Within hours, the area was sealed, the patrol route was reassigned, and the final report reduced the transmission to a single line: unidentified disturbance. What happened in those woods that night was quietly compressed into language that revealed nothing. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Many of the stories we document were shortened, rephrased, or filed away in ways that made them easy to forget. By subscribing, you help keep these accounts visible and accessible to others who still value careful investigation and historical context. If you are not familiar with YouTube, simply click the subscribe button below this video. It allows us to continue presenting serious, respectful examinations of events that were never fully explained. Sector 12 sits along a lesser-traveled corridor of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, an area defined by dense tree cover, uneven terrain, and long stretches without artificial light. Rangers assigned to that section typically worked in pairs after sunset, not because it was officially required, but because experience had taught them that isolation in that terrain could quickly become disorienting. In late autumn of 1994, night patrols were routine. There were no active search operations underway, no storms were forecast, no unusual wildlife advisories had been issued. The ranger on duty that night had more than a decade of field experience. His service record reflected no disciplinary issues, no exaggerated incident claims, and no pattern of dramatizing routine encounters. At 1:32 a.m., his transmission was procedural. He reported a parked vehicle near a secondary access road, likely belonging to late campers. He stated he would investigate and call back in 10 minutes. At 1:41 a.m., dispatch attempted a routine check-in. There was no response. That was not uncommon in low-lying areas where radio reception faltered. At 1:45 a.m., static broke through the channel, brief, irregular bursts. Then came the sentence, low and controlled: "It's not an animal." No panic, no raised voice, just a correction. The dispatcher asked for clarification. The ranger did not answer directly. Instead, he requested that another unit approach from the southern trailhead rather than the main road. When asked why, he paused for several seconds before saying, "It moved against the wind." Wind direction in wooded terrain is a small detail, but experienced rangers rely on it constantly. Animals move with or across prevailing currents based on scent tracking and cover. The implication was subtle but significant. Whatever he had observed did not behave in a way he recognized. The final complete transmission came moments later. "I'm stepping back toward the truck." Then the line filled with static again. At 1:53 a.m., a second ranger unit was dispatched. They arrived at mile marker 47, approximately 20 minutes later. The patrol truck was found idling, headlights still on, driver's side door closed, but unlocked. The ranger's radio handset lay on the seat. His flashlight was not inside the vehicle. The surrounding ground showed impressions consistent with recent movement, but the soil composition, partially frozen, partially leaf-covered, made clear prints difficult to distinguish. What was not found were signs of struggle: no blood, no torn fabric, no damaged vegetation in a concentrated pattern. The official incident summary described the scene as undisturbed. Search operations began before dawn. Thermal imaging was deployed from a helicopter at first light. Canine units were brought in by mid-morning. The dogs tracked the ranger's scent for approximately 600 yards northeast of the vehicle, before stopping abruptly near a shallow tree-line break. Handlers attempted to redirect them, but reports indicate the dogs circled and returned repeatedly to the same boundary, refusing to cross it. The incident log from that day contains multiple references to line hesitation. The term is uncommon in standard wildlife tracking notes. It suggests not confusion, but resistance. Within 48 hours, Sector 12 was temporarily closed to overnight patrols. Public statements described the closure as precautionary, citing terrain-related safety considerations. The internal memo, however, emphasized communication protocol revisions and recommended that single-unit night patrols be discontinued in specific zones. The 1:47 a.m. transmission was transcribed in full in the original log. In the finalized report submitted weeks later, the phrase, "It's not an animal," does not appear. Instead, the entry reads, "Ranger identified, unidentified movement." Proceeded with standard repositioning. Standard repositioning does not typically result in a missing ranger. In the years prior to 1994, Sector 12 had not been associated with a pattern of disappearances. However, the broader region of the park carried a long historical memory. In 1969, a 6-year-old boy named Dennis Martin vanished during a family outing in the Smokies. His disappearance led to one of the largest search operations in park history. The terrain was combed by volunteers, federal agents, and specialized military units. No trace of him was ever found. For many rangers serving in the decades after, the Martin case was not merely an archived tragedy. It was a reminder of how quickly a wooded landscape could swallow a person without leaving conclusive evidence. Though no official link was ever drawn between that event and the 1994 incident, internal interviews conducted years later revealed that several personnel referenced 69 when discussing Sector 12. The night of the radio transmission, dispatch logs show an unusual procedural choice. Rather than immediately escalating to regional law enforcement, supervisors waited until dawn to classify the situation as a missing ranger. The reasoning, according to later statements, was based on the assumption that he had become disoriented and would re-emerge with daylight. Yet the location of the truck, the intact radio, and the incomplete sentence recorded at 1:47 a.m. suggested that he had not simply wandered off. Search teams extended their grid outward over the next 5 days. Weather conditions remained stable. No flash flooding occurred. No sinkholes were identified. Interviews with campers in adjacent sectors yielded nothing significant. No one reported screams, gunshots, or mechanical sounds beyond typical wildlife activity. One retired ranger, interviewed privately years later, recalled that the tone of internal briefings shifted after the 3rd day. "We stopped talking about finding him alive," he said. "We started talking about documentation. Documentation often signals transition from rescue to record keeping." The canine boundary where the dogs refused to proceed was examined repeatedly. Soil samples were taken. Vegetation was photographed. Nothing visibly unusual appeared in those records. However, a notation in the supplementary field log described a temperature anomaly detected by handheld equipment during one late afternoon sweep. The anomaly was not large enough to be considered equipment failure, but it was not consistent with surrounding readings. That notation does not appear in the summarized case file. Sector 12 reopened to limited patrol traffic 6 weeks later. Night assignments were quietly reassigned to paired units. No public ceremony marked the disappearance. No plaque was installed at mile marker 47. Within a year, a new ranger had taken over the route. The 1:47 a.m. radio log remained archived under restricted internal access. When portions were reviewed during a later procedural audit, the transcript included ellipses where static had obscured segments. One fragment, barely legible, preceded the statement about wind direction. It appears to read, "It's pacing." Pacing suggests intelligence, or at least pattern. No conclusive evidence was ever presented indicating foul play. There were no ransom demands, no signs of criminal interference, and no recovered remains. The absence of physical indicators allowed the case to remain categorized as open, pending further information. But for those who studied the language shift between the original log and the final report, the compression of detail raised quiet questions. Why remove a direct statement that clarified perception? Why replace it with neutral terminology that erased context? Language can narrow a field of inquiry. It can also protect institutions from speculation. Whether the change in wording was meant to avoid unnecessary alarm or to simplify a complex scene remains unclear. In subsequent years, minor trail adjustments were made in Sector 12. A secondary access road was rerouted, signage was updated, official explanations cited erosion and maintenance. None referenced the missing ranger. The truck found idling at mile marker 47 was returned to service after inspection. No mechanical anomalies were discovered. The radio handset was tested and found fully operational. The flashlight missing from the vehicle was never recovered. Occasionally, visitors to the Smokies report hearing unexplained sounds after midnight, branches breaking without visible wildlife, distant rhythmic movement in underbrush, static-like interference on handheld radios. Most of these reports are attributed to normal environmental factors. Dense forests can distort sound, temperature gradients can affect signal clarity. Yet experienced rangers are trained to distinguish ordinary patterns from irregular ones. The ranger who transmitted at 1:47 a.m. did not sound frightened, he sounded precise. It's not an animal. That distinction mattered to him. Decades later, the line remains absent from the public summary. It survives only in archived transcripts and in the memory of those who heard it live. Some investigations conclude with recovered evidence, others conclude with refined procedures. The Sector 12 incident concluded with revised patrol pairings and edited language. If you have found this examination valuable, consider subscribing to this channel. Your subscription ensures that carefully researched accounts like this remain available to viewers who prefer measured, documented storytelling over speculation. There are many more cases, real incidents, incomplete reports, and unanswered transmissions that deserve thoughtful attention. Continue watching and join us as we examine other stories that were never fully explained.